All right, so there are some ways that as NBA fans, we can be pretty toxic with our discourse about the game, about the sport, and all those sorts of things. So a lot of times we are way too critical. Sometimes those criticisms of players, teams, front offices, or whatever the case may be, sometimes they are 100% justified. But, and I've actually talked about this on previous videos, there are other times where that criticism makes you actually ignore and forget about the greatness of some of these players, coaches, or whatever the case may be. And a lot of guys that are in the league right now, a lot of superstar, all-star level players have fallen victim to this. So the point of this video, I'm going to point out a number of players who I think have been criticized to the point where we are completely forgetting about their dominance and how great they are at the game. I'm going to start here with an obvious guy, and that is Jayson Tatum. I don't think right now there is a more scrutinized player on the face of the planet than Jayson Tatum. And I actually called this before the Celtics won their championship. I said, even if the Celtics win this championship, they're still going to lose. People are still not going to give this Celtics squad the respect that they deserve. They're not going to give certain Celtics players the respect that they deserve, and that has fallen heavily here on Jayson Tatum. Despite him winning his first NBA championship, and despite him showing this great all-around skill set, people still critique him very heavily. Is Jayson Tatum a perfect player? No. Does he still have parts of his game that he needs to figure out and flesh out? Absolutely. But he just won an NBA championship. One of the biggest criticisms of him coming into the season was the idea that he wasn't a championship level player. And he did all the things necessary to win an NBA championship by helping his Celtics team beat the Mavericks in 5 games and actually being the best player on the court for the Celtics in that game 5. And again, the way I look at Jayson Tatum is this. Is he the player that we thought he was going to be a few years back? Is he like that number one option, Kobe Bryant-esque type of guy that people were trying to say he was? No, he's not. But what if Jayson Tatum is optimized, I've said this a million times, as like a Swiss Army knife all-around threat? What if that is his lane? He showed us that he can dominate within that role in the finals. What if that is the lane that he found for himself? And why isn't that the discussion? Instead, we talk about how much of a disappointment he was offensively in the finals and all of those things. And to me, it's ridiculous because I think a lot of people are ignoring a great step in Jayson Tatum's career in that he became an all-around threat and, in my opinion, one of the most underrated all-around players in the entire league. We have seen him over the last couple of seasons flesh out his game and get so good in other areas, whether it's defense, rebounding, or passing and playmaking. The playmaker that he is now, he was not 4 years ago, right? He became so much better at that part of his game, yet people ignore it because he didn't put on the dynamic scoring performance and didn't have the efficiency throughout the NBA Finals. And like I said, despite that, he was still good enough to help lead his team to an NBA championship. And the Celtics were simply one of the most dominant teams in the NBA from start to finish. So Jayson Tatum is definitely a name on this list. I think right now he is the face of that list. Next guy up here is Kevin Durant. There's still a lot of lingering Kevin Durant hate since the Golden State Warriors days. I get the disappointment with Kevin Durant joining the Warriors. We don't have to get too much into that. I understand why people did not like it. But the thing with Kevin Durant is this. It feels like everything he's done, every accomplishment that he's had so far in his career, people are forgetting those things and kind of throwing those things to the side and kind of replacing them with these expectations, right? Well, Kevin Durant now has to lead a team to a championship, quote unquote, on his own, which I always thought was kind of ridiculous because he literally is a 2-time finals MVP. If you win 2 finals MVPs, you were literally, for the most part, the best player in the series, and you led your team to the championship. You were the best player on your team in an effort to win a title. Yet that isn't enough. People still need Kevin Durant to prove some other things to them. And I've always thought that was ridiculous because Kevin Durant, in my opinion, is one of those guys right now. He's kind of in that conversation of players who have absolutely nothing else left to prove to anybody. They've shown us everything they need to show us. At this point, everything for Kevin Durant is absolutely icing on the cake. I don't see how you can look at Kevin Durant's resume, the things he's accomplished, an MVP award, 4 scoring titles, 2 championships, 2 finals MVPs, multiple all-star selections, multiple All-NBA selections, all of those things, multiple gold medals. He is one of the greatest, if not the greatest Olympic basketball player of all time. I don't get how people can look at those accomplishments and look at that resume and still think that's not enough. That's why I don't understand. Like, how can you look at Kevin Durant as a player and still think that there are some other things that he hasn't shown us and still think that he's come short in any sort of way? I don't get it. Again, I understand the disappointment of him initially going and joining Golden State, but now that that's washed over and he showed the ability to win a championship and also repeat that championship success, why are we still here critiquing Kevin Durant and holding him to these ridiculous expectations that for the most part, I think he's already surpassed, yet people still haven't fully accepted that. So Kevin Durant is definitely on this list as one of those guys who's accomplished so much, but people ignore it because they want to hold on to whatever narrative that they want to hold on to. Next on this list is a former Kevin Durant teammate, and that is Russell Westbrook. I may be a little bit biased here because Russell Westbrook is simply like one of my 5 favorite players. Like, I've been watching basketball since about 2012, back when it was him, Kevin Durant, and James Harden on the same team. Russell Westbrook has always been like one of my favorite guys. So I'm a little bit biased with having him on this list, but we saw this dude do something that I don't think is going to be replicated in a while with those consecutive seasons of averaging a triple-double. And there's a lot of correlation between him putting up those numbers and team success. His team has a winning record by far whenever he's able to average and put up a triple-double. Now, was Russell Westbrook perfect in the playoffs? Not at all. He still didn't show us that he was like a number one option sort of guy in postseason scenarios, hasn't gotten deep as like a number one option sort of player in the playoffs at all. I think he's usually been like a first round and out guy in the first round of the postseason, but still, Russell Westbrook, his prime, the things he was doing during his prime have kind of got swept under the rug because of the last couple of ugly seasons, right? It kind of started when he joined the Lakers. I knew that was kind of the beginning of the end of like the positive reception towards Russell Westbrook. He just did not fit there in LA at all. It was not a fit. It did not make sense to have him next to LeBron and AD because of spacing issues and a million other things, his style of play and those sorts of things. And it didn't make him look good as a player. Individually, there is a major decline. Think about this also too. The season before he got to LA to play for the Lakers, he was playing at a very high level with the Wizards, averaging a triple-double and helped lead them to the playoffs along with Bradley Beal. Things happened in LA, and since then it has all been downhill. And I guess we can look at now as like that post prime Russell Westbrook, right? I think right now we're at a point where Russ is almost ring chasing. I don't say that in a negative way because he deserves to ring chase at this point in his career, but the negative perception on Russ that really started heavily in LA, that's when people started saying he was washed and all of that stuff. That negative perception is ridiculous because those conversations are much louder than the appreciation we have of him and what he was doing in his prime. The triple doubles, the numbers he was putting up in his prime years were absolutely ridiculous. His MVP season in 2017, one of the greatest MVP seasons of all time. Yet, despite this, majority of the discourse about Russell Westbrook during the regular season is like troll content on Twitter, right? Like looking at his blunders. Somebody may pick like 1 or 2 missed shots during the game and point out how bad he's shooting at this point in his career. It's all troll stuff online for Russell Westbrook, who is a guy, as I mentioned, who just had one of the best primes we've seen over like the last decade with the numbers he was putting up and the performances he was having. So these last couple of years for Russell Westbrook have been so bad because they've almost wiped out what he was able to accomplish during his prime years. And as a fan, like I said, one of the biggest Russell Westbrook fans you're going to find, this hurts a lot. And I don't want Russell Westbrook to be a guy that we're looking at later down the road as like an underappreciated player, because whenever you fall into those types of conversations, that means at some point the fans and the NBA reactors, social media people, guys in the media pundits, they failed at some point in time with their analysis of that particular player. If we had to come back and say that a player was underappreciated, 9 out of 10 times, that's because the media created like a narrative of them or something like that that kind of wrote out the accomplishments within their game. Obviously, kind of barring any personal things they were doing to kind of stun him. If it was all basketball related stuff, if we're looking at a guy and we're calling him underappreciated down the road, that's a lot of times because of some narrative that the media created. Last guy I'm going to list here is Giannis Antetokounmpo. Now, Giannis isn't like as universally hated like a lot of some of these guys that are already on this list, but you'll find your fair share of Giannis haters. Is Giannis's game perfect? Not at all. I do think he's going to have to add some mid-range, at least some mid-range into his game, maybe a mid-range jumper or some type of attack near that area of the floor. But regardless, he's still one of the most dominant players on the planet. And we talk a lot about what Giannis needs to add to his game, and a lot of that kind of ignores what he already has in his game. Giannis is coming off of arguably the best individual season of his career. You look at the numbers he was putting up with the efficiency. We talk so much about what Giannis needs to do. Let's look at what Giannis has done. I know we're very progressive and forward thinking, and we want to see these guys continue their greatness. But if we take a step back and look at Giannis, look at his production over the last 5 seasons, it has been otherworldly. And Giannis is really cool to watch, because if you look at him from the start of his career, he was a complete project. And to see the entire Giannis thing work was amazing, because there are a lot of guys throughout the course of like the last couple of years who were projects that never really turned out. The number one guy I'm thinking about right now who kind of pops into my mind is Thon Maker. He was like the definition of a project that didn't turn out. And there are a lot of other guys like that, but Giannis is the best project in NBA history, where teams looked at him as a guy who maybe had this upside 5 years down the road as like a superstar level player, and he ends up meeting and actually exceeding those expectations. But a lot of times our conversations about what we think Giannis needs to add in his game makes us ignore what Giannis has already done and what he already has. And he's already a dominant player. Again, is he perfect? No. Is his playing style really sustainable for when he kind of hits his mid-30s? I don't think so. So those are legitimate things to say about Giannis, but don't forget what Giannis already is, and that is still arguably the best player in the world. Like, there is still a legitimate argument for Giannis being the number one guy in the league right now. Him, Jokic, Curry, whoever else you want to throw in there, no one's the clear cut. You can present good arguments for Giannis being number one in the league, yet so many people talk about Giannis as if there's still something that is holding him back from winning a championship. People talk about Giannis like that, and he's already an NBA champion. He already has a dominant playoff run and already has a finals MVP. People talk about Giannis like he hasn't proven that he's a championship level player just yet. What I want him to prove is that he can repeat that success. That's what all the top 10 guys do. But like I said, take a step back, look at Giannis and look at what he's accomplished, and he's already there. So people talk about him like he's not gotten there just yet. And I think that's kind of ridiculous at this point. He still is arguably the best player in the world, and he can continue on that trajectory and that trend. Yes, he's got stuff to add in his game, but appreciate Giannis for what he is and what he has been the last couple of seasons. So if there are other guys that I missed here on this list, let me know in the comments. I'm very interested to know what your thoughts are on that. But again, as fans, I get the criticisms. I get that we want to see these guys improve and add things to their game. But there's a point where the criticism makes you ignore the accomplishments and how great these players are. You don't want to have a great thing presented to you and you just kind of ignore it and talk about what you wanted from it, right? Or what else you want. That's kind of a better way to put it. Like, looking at a guy who's done so much and his accomplishments, and you're kind of like, yep, but here's what I'd want him to do. Like, that's a little bit ridiculous, right? You have to appreciate what you've already gotten from a guy, while at the same time understanding that there may be more they need to add to their game sometime down the road. There's a balance there. And right now, with the way the discourse is across the league, not just in the NBA, but in sports in general, there's too much of an imbalance, right? Where people are way too overly critical, and less conversation goes into the appreciation of the players, and more of it is going into the criticism of them and their game.